Hello and welcome to Workshop 3 in this iPad music production program as part of Wheelworks Make Do Create. My name's Graham, welcome back. In this week we're going to have a look at some of the functions within the Garageband program. So over the past couple of weeks we've looked at some external applications, how to record those sounds. Then last week we looked at how to get those sounds then into Garageband, but also bring in some other audio sounds that are within Garageband. So this week we're going to continue looking at what you can do within Garageband and some of the functions that are in there. So we're going to start by going into Garageband and opening up our session from last week, which is this one here, our MDC track. So just open up what you've been working on. And here is the track as we had it last week. So we've got our recorded house beat from Figure. We've got the beat that we brought in from the Garageband loops below it. If you need a reminder of how to get stuff from Figure into your music samples folder, go back and look at video number 2 and refresh your memory, and then get back into this video. Okay, so what we're going to then do is show you some of the functions within Garageband here. There are some cool apps that you can use. I would say at the start though that if you download Garageband and you download all the sounds that you can get with Garageband, you have got lots and lots of things that you can do there. But you are kind of limited to an extent because there's only a certain amount of sounds that you can get. So it is a really good idea to start thinking about what apps are out there that you can record separately, put them into Garageband like we've done over the past couple of weeks. And next week we're going to have a look at some apps that you can actually plug in as channels within Garageband itself. So it is good to think about other apps that are out there that you can use. There's lots of free ones just to make your sounds a bit different, so you're not just relying on everything that comes with Garageband. But anyway, let's have a look at this week. So we've got our beats here, we've got our little percussion thing down below. Let's just remind ourselves of how that sounds. Okay, cool. Yeah, we like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another percussive element on top of it, so another program beat, and we're going to do that by using the inbuilt drum sequencer that comes with Garageband, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to click on this little button up the top here, which will take us to our instruments. But actually there's another way that we can do it. If we want to add in another track here, we can click here as well. So we've got those two options. We can click this one, which will take us into the instruments. This one here, which will add a new instrument. Let's actually just use this one down the bottom here. We're going to click on the big plus, and that will add a new channel in here. So whenever we click on it, it'll take us to this window, which will allow us to choose whatever instrument we want. So we're just going to flick through here until we get to drums. And there's a couple of different drum options that you can use. There's acoustic drums and smart drums are kind of functions that have been in the Garageband app for a very, very long time. But this is relatively new, this one, beat sequencer, and this is the one that we're going to use. So I'm going to click on it, and that's going to take us into this window. So the way this works is that each little square within our grid here, we can click a note into, and then whenever we press play, it will play that note. So whenever we click these in, it then plays that pattern. So I can just build this up in whatever way I want. So if I want some claps in here, and then some hi-hats, like so. And then I can click this button down here at the bottom here to turn that off. So what you're doing is just playing this through a drum machine. So if you imagine this is just a drum machine that's sitting beside your studio desk, and you're just clicking these buttons in and getting it to play a loop. So you can see whenever I turn this on that this does not play at the top here. So you're not hearing the other loops because we haven't yet recorded it. So we're just playing this as a drum machine on its own. we're not kind of syncing it up with the rest of our sounds just yet. So if I turn this back on, so we can see that there's nothing going along the top here. Our play locator isn't moving. We haven't pressed our play button. It's just playing the beat. So before we record this, what we can do is, if I just turn that off, we can go down here and then click on where it says Modern 808, and this is just the drum kit that is the default for this particular machine within Garageband. So you can change this to whatever you want it to be. Doesn't mean that your pattern will change. Your pattern will be exactly the same. It's just changing the sounds of the drums that will be playing that pattern. So it's changing the sample on each one of your little drum tracks here, but your pattern will stay the same. So you can turn your loop on and then just move through the different drum kits. And then click done once you find something that you like. You can also start clicking these out again if you want to get rid of some of the patterns, like so, and then click that back in. Like so. So I think that's a pretty good pattern. I think that's going to complement my other track. What you can do is test it out just by pressing play up at the top here. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. So I'm just going to make sure that this goes back to the start. Now we press play, you can see that this locator moves. And what we want to do is we want to record this pattern that we've made in this drum machine and get it to go into the sequencer window, or the arrange window, which is this one here. We want to record that drum beat so it goes into this window and then matches up with the rest of our beats. But we don't want to press record while our play locator is sitting around somewhere like this. So we have to make sure that before we start recording, we have to click this button here. So we click this one, and that sends our play locator back to the start. Because if our play locator is there, so say we press play, we're listening to our loops, and then you hit stop there. If you then press record and go to record your drum machine, it'll start recording from this point here. And we don't want that to happen. At this stage, we want everything just to fill this whole 8 bars. We don't want it to start like on a random point within your Garageband track. So click this back to the start. Back into our drum machine to look at our window here. And then all we have to do is press the big red record button, and then it will record. There we go. So now we can hit the stop button. So you can see that my drum machine is now turned off. The play locator moved along here. The whole thing was going red until it got to the end of bar number 8, and then it jumped back to the start. This line turns green and your drum machine turns off because it's not playing the drum machine anymore, it's playing from the recording. So if we go back into here, we can now see that we have recorded our drum track like so. We can take that back to the start. Like so. Okay, so a couple of things that we want to do here is I'm going to delete this track, because if you remember from last week, we just dropped in this track so that we can get access to this window to start bringing in our audio tracks. The other thing that we want to do is to just get rid of this now, as we don't need it. So I'm just going to tap on this, then I'm going to tap on it again to get this menu, and then I'm going to select delete. There we go. That just keeps things a wee bit clean. We don't need that track. Let's get rid of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to bring in another loop. So I've got this in my files here. If I click on my files, here's some loops that I had imported from other ones. So here's this little synth lead one. That I took from Figure, and I'm going to bring this one in. So I'm going to hold down on it until it floats, and then I'm going to drag it over like so. So you can see that I've put in 120 and A minor. Remember from the previous two videos, we were really mindful of putting in what the speed and the key of our track was. So now we've had these three drum things, we haven't necessarily needed to worry about what key these tracks are in. But we do need to worry about that now. So we need to just check that it's 120 BPM and the key is A minor. And we need to do this by going up here. So currently our tempo is 120 BPM because we changed that last time. But what we want to do is to change our key signature this time to C major. And we want to click on A and we want to click on minor. There we go. So now whenever we bring in some other loops and things like that or load up some instruments, the Garageband session will be aware that we're working within that key of A minor. And a key is just a simple series of notes. It's 7 musical notes, but each different key will have a different set of musical notes. So if I open this up again and show you key signature, so these are all the different keys that you can have, and you can have major and minor versions of them. So that means that every time I click on one of these, then the Garageband session will shift a lot of the loops, change a lot of the melodies and things that are in there to make it fit with the notes that are in that key. If it doesn't do that, then it can sound weird. You can try this out, like if you have a piano at home or anything like that, if you're playing just the white notes, which would be the key of C major, and if you're just playing around on that piano, or a keyboard or anything like that, and then all of a sudden you press a black note, then it'll sound weird. And it'll sound weird because it's not in that key. Now, at this point, I would say that weird can be good, especially if you're doing electronic stuff, and the stranger the electronic music you're making, maybe you're making music for a horror film or something like that, you want to make it sound creepy, then weird can be really good. But at the moment, we just want to make sure that the Garageband session understands that this is the key that we're working with. So if you want to then mess around with different notes, by all means do it. But at this stage, we just want to look, this is the key that came from our previous app, whether this is from Launchpad or Figure. We want to go into our settings, into key signature, and just make sure that those are the same. That's a good starting point to be at. Okay, so what I can also then do is the same as I did in last week's video. I'm just going to loop this up, so I can click on it and click loop, and then that'll play that through the whole section. So I can take this back to the start and see what it all sounds like. Okay, I think that sounds okay. But what I'm going to show you next here is a little bit of editing. So I like the way this sounds, but I'm just not sure about having the whole thing and the whole thing play throughout the whole of the track. So what I can do is at the end of this little section here, you can see you've got this little thicker white section that will turn up if you highlight it, like so. And it's got the little loop at the end. I can click on that and just drag it back. So I'm just going to drag this back to here. So it's just one loop. And then I'm going to cut this in half. So the way that I do that, if I want to cut this into bits, is I can click here. And then I can select split. So I highlight, if this isn't highlighted, then we click it to highlight it. Click it again to get the menu and select split. And it'll show us this little set of scissors. And we can grab the scissors and drag those along to wherever we want to split it. So if I bring it to the start of the second bar here, and then I'm going to click and drag it down like so, and that will chop that in half. So now I've got this bit and this bit, and then we can move this one around. If we click on this and move it about, you can change those around. But actually what I'm going to do is get rid of this. I don't really want this second section. So I'm going to click on that again and select delete and get rid of it. So now I've just got this little first bit that I'm going to use. Like so. This does not change the edit within the actual file. The original is still there, so if you want to go back and get the original, you're not destroying the original by editing here, you're just editing what can be heard within this timeline. So I think this would be nice if I copied and pasted this and had just that wee intro maybe playing every other bar. So if I click on this again, so I can get my menu, and we've got copy, and then I can grab my play locator and move that around to here, and then click in the space and select paste. And then we can do that again, move that over here, click in the blank space, paste. Just like you would copy and paste in a Word document or something like that. This is like your cursor. You're placing this where you want to paste it, and you're clicking paste. So now I can take that back, and let's have a listen. Yeah, I think that's going to work really well. Okay, one more little thing that I'm going to show you here just with these cutting your loops and moving things around is to do with this little beat here. So first thing we're going to have a look at is, I don't know if you can see this little white line here. It's a wee bit fiddly to see, but if you click on this and drag out to the right, then you get this section here, which is our mixer. And we're going to have a closer look in future videos at all the different functions we can do in here. But for today, we're going to start by looking at these sections here. So this one, speaker with a little line through it, means that whenever I click that, you won't be able to hear that track playing. But then the headphones means that whenever I click on this, you will only hear this track playing. So this is your mute button, and this is your solo button. So let me just play that and I'll show you. Like so, and you can do that with any of your tracks. You know, if we wanted to just mute that one, or just solo that one. Like that. Really handy then to be able to hear individual sounds, individual instruments that are going on in there. And that's what we're going to do right now, actually, because we want to just hear this house beat, because I think there's a little problem with this beat, and we're just going to use some editing tools just to fix it. So if I click this, so we're just soloing this little house beat, back to the start and play it. So the problem that we've got here is that our first beat has a snare on it. And within normal kind of conventional popular music, you would find that the snare would be on the second beat. So you would have a kick drum on beat number 1, and then a snare on beat number 2, a kick on beat number 3, and a snare on beat number 4. If I just open up a little instance of our drum machine here, I can show you what I mean. So a normal beat would have would be like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you were clapping along to that track at a gig or something like that, then that would be where you would clap. Would be on beat number 2 and beat number 4. So this is beat number 1, beat number 2, beat number 3, beat number 4, all divided up into slices. But the beat that we have from figure in my track is that. So even though when you're listening to it here, your brain will automatically sync into that being beat number 2, not being beat number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can actually see from the pattern here that it isn't, because this is number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which actually sounds a bit weird to have that snare on beat number 1 and beat number 3. Because our brains are so hardwired to having beat on number 2 and beat on number 4 for our snare. That's just the way that modern pop music works and has done for a very long time. So we need to fix that. So let's go in here, back into here. Let's just delete that drum machine there that we put in just as an example. We don't need it. So if we listen to this track, let's click the metronome on here. We can hear that our snare is the first beat that we hear. Now let's take that back without the metronome first. And then if we start to count along to this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that actually isn't where the 1, 2, 3, 4 is within the session because our snare's on beat number 1. So we just want to change that so we don't have a snare on beat number 1. So the way that we do that is I'm just going to use 2 fingers here just to pinch in and out on this screen so I can get a wee close zoom in to the start of this track. So we actually want beat number 1 to be there where it's just a kick. We want to get rid of this snare and then shift everything back a bit. So we can use the same tool. We can click on here, go to split, and drag that down and get rid of this. And then delete that little bit, exactly the same way as we did with our little synth thing down here. And then once we zoom back like this, we can grab on this little loop and just move it back. And then we can shift all these back like so. So now, then grab the end of this, just drag that up to the end like that. So now whenever we play it, we take it back to the start. We start with that kick. So we've got kick, snare, and then the other wee noises come in. Kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. Like so. So if we drop that back in with the rest of it, it sounds a lot more correct or technically correct because those snares are falling on beats 1 and 2, and we can put our metronome back on just to make sure that we can hear that those beats are in the right place. There we go. So a little bit of editing there just to get our other tracks in, chop those up into wee bits, and also move around these beats to sort of make sure that the patterns are correct. Last thing that we're going to have a look at then is these little sections here, which is our volume controls. So what we can start to do is just think about the volumes of the different sounds that we've got going on here, because some of them can be louder than others, and we just want to play these around. So you might have a sample that you took from another app, say it's a beat or it's a bass line or a synth line or whatever you've made, and you could bring it into your Garageband session and you could think, nah, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right to me. It's just way too loud and it doesn't work with the track. But it might just be as simple, instead of then deleting it out of the track and not using it, it might just be as simple as you need to turn it down a little bit. And we do that just with this little section here, and we can drag this down, up and down like that, to lower or increase the volume of a track. Really good tip here is that if you have something that's loud, so say we've got this synth track here, and I think this is a wee bit too loud for everything else, what we don't want to do is to turn everything else up to match how loud this is. We want to turn this one down to match the volume of everything else. And a really handy tip here, way to do this, is to turn this all the way down to the bottom and then just gradually bring it up until you can hear that there's enough of the sound and it matches everything else. So if we take this back to the start and then press play, like that. So we can now hear that we've got enough of this sound coming into the track, This is now at a slightly different place than these. I think these drums could maybe be a little bit louder as well, but in a later video we're going to come back and we're going to mix the whole thing. Okay, so that's about it for this week. Just to recap then, we went into our drum machine here. So we created a new track with this button. We chose the drum sequencer. We sequenced a little pattern within our drum machine that we thought kind of synced up with the rest of our beats. Hit the big red button. That recorded that whole thing into our track. And then we went up to our loops and we brought in another little sound from somewhere else, dragged that into our track. Here was a little synth pad from the Figure app. And then we had to make sure that we went into the tempo and to the key signature and that they matched the tempo and key signature information that we had put into the name of that loop. Then we used our little split tool just to chop those up into little bits. Then we used our split tool again to kind of edit this little beat to get the snares in the right rhythmical place. And then finally use this little tool to balance that out a wee bit to get a wee bit of a mix going. So your tune should start to be building up now. You've got some drums in there, we've got some synths in there, you might have brought in a bass line. You could even repeat this and kind of bring in maybe 2 or 3 other different things. Start to build this up, start to use these little tools to kind of break it down, edit out little bits that you like and build things up. I would just say at this point, if you're starting to build up things here, you could bring in more and more tracks. Just be mindful of how many you've got and what they do. So if I have a little bleepy synth here, I'm not necessarily going to bring in another bleepy synth underneath it because it might be doing the same sort of thing. Same as if you've got kind of a big bass line or something, don't then put 2 or 3 other bass lines underneath it because it's just going to sound really messy. So just be mindful, sometimes less is more. You don't need loads and loads of tracks to make something sound good. But do experiment with bringing different sounds in, trying things out with the drums that you've made, trying out different loops from either your own samples or the Apple loops, and start building up your own thing. Okay, so last thing then that we need to do is to save your work. So we go up to top left, the little folder here, we click that, and then that saves our track. Really good practice to get into the habit of then doing that every time that you close down your iPad, just to make sure that it will be saved. Although I think even if your iPad runs out of charge or anything like that, plug it in, get it charged up again, it does remember your work, kind of saves as it goes along. But it's good practice just to click that wee save button every time you're done, and that saves it for the next time. Okay, 2 more things then before we go. As always, if you're making some content, you're getting some beats together, starting to put together some loops and things like that, we would really like to hear it. So anything that you've made, feel free to send it to the email address that is up on the screen now. That's Tanya@wheelworksarts.com. Send your little loops over there. We'd love to hear them, to see what type of music you're making. We'd love to get them, some of those examples up on social networks and websites and stuff like that. It would be really, really cool to hear what you guys are doing. And lastly, subscribe to the channel. There is so much stuff going on with this Make, Do, Create thing that Wheelworks are doing over this 6-week period. There's another amazing music course that is to do with sound recording, and there's going to be some drumming stuff in there, some live drumming. It's going to be really cool. We've got animation, photography, illustration, lots of different things happening. Brilliant courses, all hosted by professional artists from Northern Ireland, giving up their time to show you guys what to do and how to get started within those art forms that you can be doing at home with minimum equipment and expense, and getting some amazing kind of artistic ideas going. So click on the subscribe button. Make sure that you're getting those updates on what is going on when the new videos are coming up. Yeah, we will see you in a week's time where we're going to be looking at recording some additional instruments within Garageband. All right, we'll see you then. Bye.